So the sun shined on St James's Park this morning. Huge occasion for Newcastle United. The big test for Newcastle is, can they show that that Fulham game was a one-off? Can they show that they're going to be prepared to put in the performance needed here against Man City? In a way, today is a fixture where you've got to be honest and say, yes, obviously they want a result, but they need to show that the performance at Fulham, was, as I say, a one-off. I think had Newcastle gone into this game on the back of a lucky point or something like that, then maybe that would have papered over the cracks, because obviously there has been some serious problems with Newcastle performance levels this season. And today, it's kind of sink or swim against Man City. They've got to go and show they can do it against a Pep Guardiola side who arrive here without De Bruyne, without Rodri, but still with plenty of class in the bag to put on a show themselves. Newcastle under no illusions of what's gone on here. There's been an inquest at the training ground this week. You can read about that on Chronicle Live. The preparations changed because of the Wimbledon postponement, and Newcastle started to become more immersed in the weekend game rather than the recovery that they were going to be looking at after Wimbledon. So let's be honest, it's going to be a tough game today, but as I say, the performance levels definitely important today. Newcastle have got to show that they're not a team on the slide. They've got to show that they can put up a fight against Man City. Hopefully they can do that this afternoon at St James's Park. It ended 1-1 here between Newcastle and Manchester City on a day where I have to say that Newcastle fans might have accepted a point against a Man City team who could run away with it again this season. But I think really for Newcastle, they needed that response. They got it today. Fulham was absolutely awful last week. Today, much better. Even from the early parts of the game, I thought Newcastle looked like a team that were eager to make a point, actually, after all the criticism they've had. Some of it justified after what happened at Craven Cottage, but I think really we saw a response, we saw some teeth from Newcastle, and yeah, they've got the season back on track after that little bit of a mishap last week. They did go behind in the game, Guardiola putting Man City ahead in the first half, 10 minutes left of the first period, but afterwards, the second half, Newcastle much better. Started with intent, got back into it with a penalty after Anthony Gordon went down in the box. Then he steps up coolly to make it 1-1. So a point in the pocket. Newcastle shrug off last week's defeat against Fulham. Yeah, beat Wimbledon in the Cup next week. Get through to the next stage, and then Newcastle United can look forward to that game against Everton, having done probably what was asked of them at St James's Park in the last couple of games. And I think really you look at what happened last week at Fulham, and this was the best way to respond. So final reflections from St James's Park after 1-1 draw against Manchester City. I thought the questions that were posed to Newcastle before the game, they were all answered here today in abundance. First half, I thought they did show Man City probably a bit too much respect in some ways. I think Man City did dominate the first half, but once Newcastle got that little bit of confidence back in them, they got the wind back in the sails second half. At one point, it only looked like there was going to be one winner after Newcastle pulled themselves back in it at 1-1. Anthony Gordon was the player that the sort of cameras were on to try and get a response. No Alexander Isak today. And yeah, calm nerves to score the penalty, but to win it and stay cool in front of an expectant crowd. I mean, that is what he's paid for at the end of the day, but ultimately he showed what he can do on the big stage, and when the emphasis is completely on him, because no Isak, no Callum Wilson, Newcastle really lacking that goal scorer. Eddie Howe in his press conference saying, we're without two number 9s at the minute. But today, Anthony Gordon provided that answer. Around the park, I mean, Dan Burn, I think he found it difficult against Haaland to begin with. I think Haaland kind of body checked him right in front of the press box early in the game, but grew in strength, grew in belief, and helped Newcastle stage this fight back by restricting Haaland. I mean, he still had five goal attempts, Haaland, on the day, but I think really him coming off the pitch without a goal when he's got 10 goals to his name already, you know, it's something he's not used to, and certainly that's what he had to endure today. So great for Dan Burn to get that performance under his belt against one of the top players in the world, and you know, it just helps Newcastle grow with belief. I asked Eddie Howe in the press conference as well. I said, do you feel today, when you're playing like you were in the second half and you're pushing and knocking on the door, that this team, with or without incoming signings in January, can they pretty much be what they want to be, anything they want to be, really, you know? And he agreed. He said, well, it's about mindset and it's about taking that forward into the next few games now, and Newcastle need to make this place a ground where teams fear coming here. Fortress St James's, that's what it used to be known as, and Newcastle haven't lost a Premier League game here for a long time, so to really hold one of the top teams and send a message out, I think that's fantastic for Eddie Howe's team. Where do they go from here? Well, Carabao Cup, Wimbledon Tuesday night. Obviously they need to win. It doesn't matter how they do it, they just need to get through. We don't want a late night with a penalty shoot or anything like that, but I just hope Newcastle can put in a convincing display. I'm pretty sure there'll be a lot of changes, but they need to set up that game against Chelsea in the 4th round, and then, you know, they can start focusing on Everton. But it's been a tough week for Newcastle, but as I say, I think they've answered all the questions put at them. Today was the top performance we all wanted to see. That was the question before the game. They've answered it. They couldn't win the game, but hey, it's against Manchester City. Not many teams are going to just roll them over. So positives to take from this game, and now they move on to that clash against Wimbledon in what, you know, was very much an interrupted week for Newcastle. They had to change the training schedule around, but I think it benefited them in the end, and I think we've seen that today. So it's ended today 1-1 against Man City. They can move on. They can move on with confidence, but there's still work to be done, don't get me wrong, but I think today was a big step in the right direction.